Have you ever just stopped and looked at the world, at the universe, and wondered, how? How did all of this incredible complexity, all this structure, just happen? Starting from something like the Big Bang, which we imagine is pure random chaos? Well, it's one of the biggest questions there is, right? How does order just spontaneously appear out of nowhere? Today, we're going to dig into a really cool idea that suggests it's not some cosmic magic trick. It might just be a fundamental property of how things work.
We're diving into a paper that built this tiny digital universe in a bottle to see what would happen. And what it shows is pretty mind-blowing. It gives us a step-by-step recipe for how beautiful, stable patterns can literally crystallize out of a background of pure, featureless noise. So, to really get a feel for this, before we get into the digital stuff, we're going to start with an analogy that's not just intuitive, it's beautiful. We're talking about something called cymatics. Okay, picture this. You take a metal plate and you sprinkle some sand on it. Now, if you start vibrating that plate with a single pure musical note, the sand doesn't just dance around like crazy. No way. It actually organizes itself into these incredible geometric patterns. You're literally seeing the shape of that sound wave. This idea right here, that frequencies have inherent shapes, is the key to this whole thing. Just hang on to that.
Right, so if one clean, simple frequency creates order, what happens if you start with the complete opposite? Well, that's exactly what these researchers did. They built a digital sandbox, a computer version of that vibrating plate. But instead of feeding it a nice, clean musical tone, they started off with pure, unadulterated chaos.
And the journey from that chaos to order basically happens in 4 stages. First, they seed the whole thing with randomness. Then, they just let it evolve based on one single, very simple rule. This makes the system naturally settle down, kind of like a shaken snow globe. It sheds all its messy energy and disorder until, bam, a stable, coherent pattern emerges and locks in.
And that starting point is so important to understand. They call it the 0D seed. It is the digital version of pure white noise. You know, like the static on an old TV set? It contains literally every possible frequency, every possibility, all jumbled together with no structure at all. There's absolutely zero pre-programmed order. It is a true blank slate of chaos.
So what's the one simple rule that guides everything? It's called curvature feedback, and you can just think of it as a rule of smoothness. Basically, the system doesn't like sharp, jagged edges or wrinkles. Those sharp bits represent high energy, and the system is programmed to find the laziest possible state. It's always looking for the smoothest, lowest energy configuration it can find. You know, it's just nature's tendency to chill out.
But here's the really cool part. As the system chills out, it's not just randomly smoothing things over. It's actually doing this incredible sorting process. It's tuning out all the garbage to find a hidden symphony of pure frequencies buried inside that initial noise.
This gets at a really fundamental idea in physics called a Fourier transform. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. Any signal, even total random noise, is actually just a bunch of simple, pure sine waves, or Fourier modes, all added together. So that initial TV static, it's a chaotic mess of every possible frequency crashing into each other. But as the system evolves, most of those frequencies cancel each other out. The system's only job is to find the special few that actually reinforce each other and create a stable repeating pattern.
So you can see this whole process as a journey from high entropy, total chaos, to low entropy, which is order. You start with the TV static, this blast of a million random frequencies. But as that rule of smoothness gets to work, it dampens down all the chaotic, high-energy stuff and amplifies the few frequencies that are the most stable, the most energy efficient. It literally turns noise into a clear, resonant musical chord.
And you might be wondering, what stops the system from just jumping back into chaos? Well, there's a mathematical guarantee baked in. It's called Lyapunov descent. All you need to know is that this math ensures the total energy in the system can only go down. It can never go up. It is a one-way street, forcing the system downhill towards stability. It's literally forbidden from deciding to become more chaotic again. So the system is guaranteed to find a stable state. But what does it actually settle into? What does it look like? This is where we see the final, amazing patterns emerge, and it brings us right back to that sand on a plate. As the system gets rid of all that messy, high-frequency noise, the energy that's left over has to go somewhere, right? Well, it gets concentrated into just a handful of dominant frequencies. These are the ones that fit the best inside the system, the ones that resonate. They are, in essence, the natural voice of the system itself, and they form these beautiful, stable, self-sustaining patterns. And there you have it. These locked modes that you see are the system's own fundamental somatic patterns. The fancy math term for them is Laplacian eigenmodes. Eigenmode just means a natural mode of vibration for a system. And Laplacian is the math that measures curvature, or smoothness. So these are literally the smoothest, most natural vibrating patterns possible for this space. Just like a guitar string has a few specific notes it loves to ring at, this digital space finds its own fundamental resonant shapes, all by itself.
So what's so important about these eigenmodes? Well, they're not just random pretty pictures. They are the most energy efficient, the most stable, and the most natural patterns that can even exist in that space. They are truly self-organizing. They are the resonant voice of the system, born from a simple rule acting on pure chaos.
Now, if the story ended there, it would already be amazing, right? A demonstration of how order can just emerge from nothing. But the paper takes this one gigantic, mind-bending step further. It connects these emergent patterns to one of the most basic properties of our reality, mass.
The conclusion of the paper is just wow. It says this model provides a route from simple waves to what we call inertial mass, and it all comes down to one thing: confinement. Okay, that's a bit of a mouthful, so let's break down what on earth that actually means.
Once one of these stable wave patterns, an eigenmode, forms, it doesn't just spread out and disappear. Because it's a perfect resonance, it becomes localized. It gets trapped in space, becoming a self-sustaining standing wave. It's no longer just a wave traveling everywhere, it's a persistent, contained structure of energy, like this toroid shape. It starts to behave, well, kind of like a particle.
Now, here's the final piece of the puzzle. For this confined pattern to even exist, it needs a certain minimum amount of energy. The physics of the system creates what's called a spectral gap. You can think of it like an energy floor, or the price of admission. The pattern can't have less energy than this minimum amount, or it just dissolves back into the noise. It needs to hit that energy threshold to be real. And here it is, the big reveal. That minimum, locked-in amount of energy that a confined wave needs just to exist, that is what we perceive and measure as inertial mass. In this model, mass isn't some little nugget of stuff. Mass is an emergent property. It's the energy of a wave that has organized itself into a stable, confined, resonant pattern. Mass is the echo of a self-sustaining vibration. I mean, that's a totally profound shift in thinking. It suggests that underneath this solid, stable world we see, there's a universe of vibrating fields constantly settling into their most stable harmonies. So the question I want to leave you with is this. If something as fundamental as mass is really just an emergent pattern, an echo of a deeper resonance, what else about our reality is the same? What else is just a beautiful pattern that emerged from the noise?